Most folks in town said a man had to be desperate or foolish to take home an animal nobody else wanted. People whispered it at the auctions, at the feed store, even by the well where folks gathered to trade news. So, when the thin horse with the dull coat and tired eyes was led out by the auction handler, the crowd barely bothered to look up. A few kicked the dust with their boots, some chuckled under their breath, and others just turned away as if the creature wasn't worth a second glance. But the farmer standing near the back didn't look away. He watched the horse with an expression the others didn't understand. There was something in the way the animal shifted its weight, something in the quiet way it looked around, that made him look closer. The bidding never truly started. No one raised a hand. No one stepped forward. The handler seemed embarrassed, tugging at the rope as if wishing he could hide the horse behind the barn. The animal looked like it barely had enough strength to stand a long day, let alone plow or pull. Most people could not see anything useful about it. To them it was just another burden. A creature taking up space. But the farmer finally lifted his hand and the crowd murmured. They didn't understand why someone like him, who worked hard for every coin, would take a chance on something seen as useless. When the horse was brought to him, the farmer placed a hand gently on its neck. The animal flinched at first, as if unsure what a soft touch meant. Its ribs showed beneath the coat, and the rope around its head looked worn as though it had been through too many hands. The farmer loosened the rope immediately. People nearby watched with raised brows, wondering what in the world he expected to gain from it. On the walk home, the horse followed him without pulling back or hesitating, though its steps were slow. The road stretched long across fields of dry grass and quiet land. The wind blew dust across the path, and far off, someone was working their fields, but the world around them seemed still somehow. The farmer studied the horse now and then, noting how it flicked its ears at every sound, how it seemed alert even in its weakness. Something about the way the animal carried itself felt strange, like there was strength hiding under its tired frame. When they reached the farm, the chickens scattered out of the way, and the old dog barked a few times at the newcomer. The farmer led the horse into the barn, letting it settle into a stall with fresh hay. The horse didn't attack the food the way starved animals often did. Instead, it took small bites, chewing slowly, as if listening to the sounds around it. The farmer found that peculiar. It wasn't fear, exactly. More like the horse was waiting for something. The rest of the day passed quietly. The farm had its usual work: fence repairs, feed hauling, checking the fields. But the farmer kept thinking of the horse. He had bought animals before, but none had left him with a feeling he couldn't quite name. There was something hidden, something beneath the surface. He felt it more and more each time he stepped into the barn. At dusk, he returned with a lantern. The barn smelled of hay, warm earth, and quiet breath. The horse lifted its head as he walked in, ears perked, eyes following him. When he raised the lantern slightly, the light caught the horse's eyes in a way that made him pause. There was intelligence there, a depth he didn't expect from an animal that everyone had dismissed. He set the lantern on a hook and leaned on the stall door, watching the horse quietly. He spoke in a soft voice, just talking about the day, the way he sometimes talked to his dog or to the animals in the fields. He didn't expect the horse to understand, but the creature watched him with a focus that felt almost unsettling. Not threatening, just observant, as if studying him right back. That night, as he walked back toward the house, he felt a strange pull in his thoughts, a curiosity that wouldn't let go. The horse wasn't what people thought it was. He didn't know how he knew, but he was certain something about it didn't match its appearance. And the thought bothered him all night as he tried to sleep. The wind outside shifted against the windows. The dog whined once, but settled again. Something felt different on the land. The next morning, when he opened the barn door, he froze. The horse stood exactly where he had left it, but the stall looked different. The old latch he had meant to fix was undone, not broken but opened cleanly. The horse could have walked out. It could have wandered off, but it hadn't moved. It simply stood there, looking at him as if expecting him to notice. He checked the latch again, running his fingers over the metal. There was no sign it had been forced. Animals didn't do things like that, not ones as weak as this one. He stepped inside slowly. The horse didn't shy away. If anything, it stepped closer and lowered its head, not in fear, not in begging, more like recognition. He fed it, brushed its coat, and tried to ignore the uneasy feeling that grew stronger with every passing hour. When he worked outside that day, he kept glancing at the barn, half expecting something else unusual to happen. The sun moved across the sky, birds called from the trees. But the farm didn't feel the same. He didn't feel the same. Later in the afternoon, a few townsfolk came by for supplies. They asked him why he had wasted money on that horse. They joked about how he'd be lucky if it didn't collapse in the field. He brushed off their comments, though inside he felt protective of the animal. They saw weakness. He saw something else, something he couldn't yet name. When the people left, he checked the horse again. This time he noticed marks on its legs hidden under the hair. Not injuries from neglect, but patterns that didn't look like anything caused by rope or work or weather. They looked deliberate, almost like symbols, but worn and faded. He tried to clean them gently, but the horse shifted its weight, not in pain, but as if certain he didn't need to touch them. That night the wind rose stronger, carrying the smell of distant rain. The sky darkened faster than usual. When he brought the lantern to the barn again, the flame flickered wildly even before the door opened. He stepped inside, and the horse looked different in the dim light, larger somehow. The air felt charged, like a storm was building inside the barn itself. He approached slowly, lantern held steady. The horse turned its head. For a moment he thought he saw something in its eyes, something that didn't belong to an ordinary animal. A reflection that wasn't from the lantern flame. A brightness deep within, as if the creature held a truth he was not supposed to see yet. He stepped back, heart pounding. The horse didn't move. It didn't threaten him. It simply watched him with the same calm, steady gaze, but now he felt a certainty rising in his chest. The horse was hiding something. Something that wasn't weakness. Something the town had never imagined. As he backed toward the door, the lantern flame steadied again, and the barn fell quiet. He stood in the doorway, staring at the creature that everyone had called useless, but he knew now the word didn't fit. Not even close. Something was coming, something tied to that horse. And whatever it was, it had already started changing the air around the farm. He didn't know yet what the truth was, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The town was about to be stunned. The next morning, the farmer woke before the sun. Sleep had come in short stretches, always broken by thoughts of the strange horse in his barn. Even when he drifted off, he felt pulled toward the image of its steady eyes and the marks hidden beneath its coat. The sky outside was still dark, and the air carried the cool bite that came before dawn. He pulled on his boots and stepped out, half expecting to find something wrong the moment he opened the barn doors. But the barn was silent. The animals stirred at the sound of him entering, but nothing felt disturbed. The horse stood in its stall again, calm and alert, as though it had been waiting for him. The farmer stepped closer, lantern in hand, studying the creature more carefully. Its coat looked a little less dull, though he figured it might just be the way the light caught it. Its eyes seemed clearer, too. He found that strange, considering it hadn't eaten much the day before. He reached out and rested a hand on its neck. The horse leaned into the touch. Not in a desperate way, but like it knew him, like it trusted him already. He whispered something soft, just a greeting, and felt the horse's breath warm against his arm. This quiet moment should have calmed him, but instead it stirred something uneasy in his chest. He didn't understand how an animal so weak, so overlooked, could stand there with such quiet certainty. As he stepped away to fetch water, he kept glancing back. One thing was clear. This horse wasn't going to be like any he had owned before. The town had called it useless, but nothing about this creature felt simple. After feeding it, he headed out to begin his morning chores. The sun crept up slowly, painting the land with warm gold. He repaired fences, checked the fields, and made sure the other animals were fed. Normally this routine settled his mind, but today his thoughts kept circling back to the horse. Every time the wind blew from the direction of the barn, he felt drawn toward it. By midday, he decided to take a break and return to check on the new arrival. When he opened the barn door, he found the horse standing near the stall gate instead of inside the stall. The gate wasn't open this time, but the horse had positioned itself with deliberate precision, as if waiting for him. The posture caught him off guard. It looked too calculated to be random. Not threatening, but purposeful. He approached slowly. The horse didn't move until he reached the gate. Then it took a small step back, giving him space. He frowned slightly. Animals reacted to people all the time, but this felt different. This felt like the horse was giving him room to pass, as if it understood what he needed before he even made a move. He checked the latch and found nothing wrong. It was tightly secured. That eased him a little, though only for a moment. The memory of the latch being undone the night before lingered in the back of his mind. He wasn't imagining what he'd seen. Something had been strange. Something still was. When he left the barn again, he carried that thought with him. By afternoon, a couple of neighbors stopped by asking for help moving lumber, and he agreed. He spent hours lifting, hauling, and stacking wood near their shed. But as they worked, one of the neighbors brought up the horse. He mentioned that others in town were curious why the farmer had taken it home. Word had spread fast, as it often did. People had started making guesses. Some thought he had bought it out of pity. Others believed he had wasted his money. A few even speculated it would end up being trouble on his land. The farmer kept quiet, trying not to show the irritation he felt. It didn't matter to him what they thought, but he couldn't shake the feeling that more eyes than usual were on him these days. When he returned home later that day, he felt a shift in the air again. The sky had darkened sooner than expected, and the wind carried a restless hum. As he walked to the barn, his steps slowed. His hand paused on the latch before opening the door. When he stepped inside, the horse lifted its head and stared at him with the same calm, steady gaze. But something was different. The marks on its legs, faint and worn when he first noticed them, seemed clearer than before. Not bright or glowing, just sharper, easier to see. He squinted and came closer, brushing the coat lightly with the side of his hand. The horse didn't resist. The lines of the marks curved in ways that didn't resemble numbers or letters. They flowed, more like part of something old and intentional. He traced one gently with his finger, unsure what he was even looking at. It certainly didn't look like the scars of rope or work. It looked crafted. Questions pressed hard against his mind. Who had owned this horse before the auction? Why had no one mentioned these marks? Why had the horse been so weak and yet behaved with such clarity? He stepped back, unsettled. The horse tilted its head slightly, watching him as though reading his thoughts. He whispered something again, not sure why he felt the need to reassure the creature. Maybe he was reassuring himself. Later that evening, while he ate a quiet meal inside the house, he kept the lantern burning longer than usual. The dog lay near his feet, occasionally lifting its head at the sound of wind against the windows. The farmer tried to distract himself by planning work for the next day, but the horse lingered in every corner of his mind. When he finally went to check on it again, the night had settled deep and heavy. The moon cast a faint glow across the farmyard. As he neared the barn, he paused. A sound drifted from inside, not a noise of panic or struggle. More like a soft shuffle, followed by a gentle exhale. He stepped in quietly, holding the lantern higher this time. The horse stood in the middle of the stall, facing him. Its stance was steady, stronger than he expected. It no longer looked like an animal near collapse. Its coat, though still thin, seemed to catch the light differently. He approached slowly, trying to understand what had changed. The horse took a step forward, bridging part of the distance between them. Its eyes were calm but intense. Something about that gaze held a message he couldn't decipher. He stayed with it a while, brushing its mane and speaking quietly. He didn't know why he felt compelled to stay, but leaving didn't feel right. The air in the barn had shifted again, carrying a soft warmth that contrasted with the night outside. Eventually he forced himself to return to the house. But as he walked away, he felt the horse's attention following him until the barn door closed. The next morning he woke to a knock at the door. A man from town stood outside, asking if the horse he'd bought was still alive. The tone wasn't kind. It was almost mocking. The farmer swallowed his frustration and answered simply that the horse was doing fine. The man looked surprised, even doubtful. Then he leaned in slightly and mentioned something strange. Someone had seen tracks near the farm during the night. Not human tracks. Not horse tracks either. something smaller and lighter, almost like an outline pressed into the dirt. The farmer felt a chill rise up his spine. He tried to act casual, but the man's words echoed in his mind long after he left. He went to the barn immediately. The horse stood calm as always, looking healthier by the hour. But the farmer didn't look at the horse first. He checked the dirt just outside the barn door. He crouched down and scanned the ground. There were tracks. Not large enough to be a horse's, not shaped like a dog's, not human either. The marks were faint, as if something had moved quickly and lightly across the earth. His pulse hammered. He knelt closer, studying each outline, trying to convince himself they were nothing unusual. But deep down, he already knew they weren't ordinary. He rose slowly and turned back toward the barn. The horse gazed at him, calm as ever, standing in the shadows like it had been waiting for him to notice the tracks. He stepped inside, heart heavy with questions he couldn't yet voice. Something connected the horse to those tracks, something hidden, something the town had dismissed without understanding. He placed a hand on the stall door and took a slow breath. The truth behind this creature was deeper than he imagined, and whatever it was, he could feel it getting closer. The tension wasn't lifting. It was growing, wrapping itself around the air of the farm. Something was coming, and now he knew it was no coincidence the horse had ended up with him. He wasn't sure why yet, but he was getting closer to finding out. The days that followed seemed to stretch longer than usual, as if time itself was dragging its feet while the tension around the farm quietly grew. The horse was settling into its new home, though no one in town seemed to care enough to notice. People continued whispering behind the farmer's back, and the same voices that once praised his judgment now acted like he had lost every bit of sense he ever had. Still, he carried on with his work, clearing fields, checking fences, and tending to the animals, though a part of his mind was always drifting back to the quiet creature standing in the far stall. The horse watched everything around it in a sharp, observant way that made the farmer take longer pauses than usual. There was something thoughtful in the animal's eyes, something that didn't match the weak and tired body everyone else mocked. The farmer often found himself standing near the stall, just watching the horse breathe, wondering what story it carried. He sensed a hidden weight pressing on the animal, as if it had seen or survived something no one else could guess. The idea stayed with him more than he expected, especially when the wind picked up at night and the barn creaked in its usual rhythm. People in town kept warning him that time would prove them right. They said the horse would do nothing except drain his resources. Some even joked that they might offer him money just to get the horse off his hands again. He ignored their remarks, though they echoed in his mind when he was alone. But the quiet animal showed no sign of being a burden. It didn't lash out or collapse or cause trouble. Instead, it stood with a calm strength, as if waiting for something the farmer didn't understand yet. As the days passed, he noticed small things that made him think deeper. The horse walked with a slow but steady stride, and when it lifted its head, there was a grace that didn't match its rough appearance. Once, when a loud crash came from the other side of the barn, every animal bolted in fear, but the horse barely flinched. It shifted its weight and watched with a steady gaze that seemed to cut through the noise. The farmer couldn't shake off how unusual that was. Even the boldest horses he had seen would jump at sudden sounds, yet this one reacted like it had heard far worse. He started talking to it more, not expecting answers, but hoping to understand something about the mystery it carried. He would lean on the stall door and share the worries he didn't voice to anyone else. The horse remained still, listening in a way that made the farmer feel strangely understood. It was odd how comforting its presence became, something he never expected from an animal everyone else dismissed as worthless. Rumors around town grew with every passing day. People claimed the farmer was becoming too attached. They said the horse must have bewitched him, or that he had lost his mind after years of working in the sun. Some even speculated the animal brought bad luck. The farmer heard all of it when he visited the general store, though no one said it to his face. Still, he didn't confront them. He simply observed how their curiosity was slowly turning into something sharper, something that suggested they might eventually come snooping around his farm just to see what they were missing. His friend, one of the few who still supported him, tried to lighten the tension. He'd stop by, drop off supplies, and share a laugh whenever he could. But even he couldn't hide the concern on his face. He warned the farmer that the town's interest wasn't harmless. People didn't like what they didn't understand, and they especially didn't like being proven wrong. The farmer brushed it off, though part of him wondered if the horse's presence was stirring something deeper in the town than he first realized. Meanwhile, the weather shifted unpredictably, bringing a strange uneasiness with it. Clouds started rolling in earlier than usual, and mornings carried a bite of cold that shouldn't have arrived so soon. The fields grew quieter, birds stayed perched in tighter clusters, and the usual bright hum of the landscape softened. The farmer didn't know why the air felt different, but each day made the sensation stronger. And during those moments, when the wind rushed through the barn, the horse would lift its head as if recognizing a signal he couldn't hear. One afternoon, the farmer noticed the horse pacing for the first time. It wasn't panicked or restless. It moved deliberately, measuring each step around the stall, pausing at certain spots and then starting again. The farmer watched, confused, because the behavior didn't match anything ordinary. The horse seemed to be thinking through each movement. He followed the direction of its gaze and saw nothing unusual, yet the horse acted like it sensed something important beyond the walls. That night, he couldn't sleep. Something felt off around the farm. The silence outside carried a strange heaviness, and every small noise made him sit up. Eventually, he walked out to the barn with a lantern, pushing the door open slowly. The horse stood in the center of the stall, completely alert, as if it had been waiting for him. Its ears were pointed forward, and its eyes reflected the lantern light with an intensity he had never seen before. He approached slowly, feeling a strange mix of concern and curiosity. Before he could speak, the horse turned its head toward the far end of the barn. The farmer followed its gaze and heard a distant sound coming from outside. It wasn't loud, but it didn't belong to the usual nighttime noises. He opened the barn door wider and stepped out into the open air. The sound came again, softer this time, but enough to send a chill up his spine. He walked a few steps forward, scanning the dark fields for any movement. The wind pressed against him as if urging him back. The horse let out a low breath from behind him, not fearful but aware. The farmer returned to the barn with a strange feeling in his chest, almost like anticipation mixed with unease. He stood near the stall again, and the horse slowly lowered its head, as if signaling that the moment had passed but not fully ended. He walked back to the house later, but sleep never came. He kept thinking about the sound, the pacing, and the way the horse reacted. It all felt connected, but he couldn't understand how. The next morning brought more whispers from the town. People claimed they had heard strange noises overnight. Some said they saw lights moving in the distance. Others believed it was just their imagination playing tricks on them. But one thing was clear. Everyone felt the same shift in the air. Something was stirring near the edges of the town, something that made people uneasy enough to keep their children indoors and lock their doors earlier than usual. The farmer listened quietly, not sharing what he had seen or heard, but the horse remained on his mind all day. He noticed it watching the fields more intently, especially toward the direction of the distant woods. Every so often it would lift its head as if sensing something coming closer. The farmer couldn't explain why, but he trusted the animal's instincts more than the opinions of the townspeople. By the end of the day, the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky with a dim glow that disappeared faster than usual. Shadows stretched across the ground, long and sharp. The farmer walked out to the barn again, not sure whether he was checking on the horse or seeking comfort from its presence. The horse stood at the stall door, waiting, as if it knew he was coming. He stepped inside and felt a sudden stillness in the air, a stillness so complete it made him stop walking. The horse's posture was different tonight, focused and steady. The farmer followed its gaze again, but this time he saw something out of place. Far in the distance, a faint flicker moved near the edge of the woods. He strained his eyes, trying to see what it was, but the flicker vanished as quickly as it appeared. His heart pounded as he stepped closer to the doorway, but he didn't move beyond it. He felt as if crossing that threshold would pull him into something he wasn't ready to face. The horse shifted, letting out a soft breath that echoed through the barn like a quiet warning. The farmer turned toward it, seeing the same strength in its eyes as before, But now there was something else too. Something that hinted the horse knew what was coming long before anyone else did. He stood there, caught between fear and curiosity, knowing this mystery was far from over. And as the night deepened around the farm, he realized one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever was unfolding in the shadows of the town, the horse was connected to it in ways he couldn't yet understand. The next few days moved with a thick sense of pressure, as if the farm itself was holding its breath. The farmer woke each morning feeling the same weight in his chest, and every time he stepped outside he found himself scanning the fields without meaning to. The horse sensed the change too. Its calm nature had not faded, but there was a sharper alertness in its posture, a readiness that made the farmer watch it more closely. The animal stood taller, listening for sounds he could not yet hear, as if something far away was calling for its attention. Word spread that more strange things were happening near town. People whispered about shadows moving behind the trees, lights flickering at odd hours, and animals acting restless. A few claimed they saw a figure wandering near the old trail late at night. No one agreed on what it looked like, but everyone felt uneasy. The farmer listened quietly to all the talk while keeping to himself. He knew the tension was rising, and he felt it more clearly each time he walked past the barn. One evening, the wind changed direction. It carried a sharper edge that cut across the farm like a warning. The farmer stood on his porch, holding onto the rail as he watched the trees sway in unpredictable patterns. He felt the unease settle deeper in his stomach. Something was shifting again. As the sky darkened, the air grew still in an unnatural way that made him step off the porch and walk directly to the barn. His steps were quick without him deciding to move faster. When he opened the barn door, the horse stood exactly as he expected, facing the far side with a focused stare. It didn't move when he entered. It didn't flinch when the door creaked behind him. The farmer followed the direction of its gaze again, though he already knew he wouldn't find anything there. What caught his attention instead was the sound that followed. It was faint, carried from a distance, almost like something humming through the ground instead of the air. He held his breath, trying to listen harder. The horse nodded its head slightly, acknowledging the sound in a way that made the farmer's skin prickle. The humming faded, replaced by a deeper silence that made everything around them feel suspended. He rested a hand on the horse's neck, hoping to calm them both, but his hand trembled. The horse didn't shy away. It leaned into his touch, the warmth grounding him for a moment before the tension returned. The next morning, the town was buzzing with fear. A family living on the far side reported that their cattle had bolted during the night and refused to return to the pasture. Another family claimed they heard heavy steps behind their house before dawn. People were trying to make sense of everything, but no one had answers. Fear pushed them into suspicion. They began pointing fingers, claiming someone was playing tricks or trying to scare the town. Others feared something worse, though they couldn't put words to it. The farmer tried to keep a low profile, but even he felt the stares whenever he rode into town for supplies. People watched him like they were waiting for him to speak up or reveal something, as if they believed he knew more than he let on. And maybe he did, though he didn't want to admit it. Deep down, he felt the horse was the piece that didn't fit with the rest of the puzzle, and he was terrified of what he might learn if the truth finally revealed itself. By the third night, the anxiety in town had reached a peak. People locked their doors earlier than usual and kept lanterns burning longer. The farmer did the same, but he still found himself drawn toward the barn. He walked there slowly, feeling the cold tighten around his shoulders. When he opened the barn door, the horse was pacing again, but this time the movements were stronger, more purposeful. It wasn't nervous. It was preparing. The farmer stood quietly, overwhelmed by a strange certainty that the horse was no ordinary creature. It felt like the animal had been waiting for something to reach the farm, and that something was finally getting close. The farmer reached out his hand, and before he could touch the horse, a loud crack echoed across the fields. It wasn't thunder. It sounded more like a tree splitting apart under great force. The horse whipped its head toward the sound, and the farmer did the same. Panic surged through him, and he rushed outside without thinking. The night sky stretched endlessly above, and the fields rolled out in silence, but the echo of the crack lingered. He scanned the darkness for signs of movement, every muscle in his body tight. He didn't see anything at first. But then a faint glow appeared near the woods, low to the ground, flickering as if someone was waving a lantern in slow, uneven motions. The farmer took a few steps forward before stopping himself. Something about the glow felt wrong, like it wasn't coming from a lantern at all. The horse stepped out of the barn behind him, its hooves soft against the dirt, moving closer until it stood at his side. The farmer didn't understand how such a weak-looking animal could suddenly appear so imposing. Its presence steadied him, though the icy grip of fear didn't loosen. The glow faded into darkness again, leaving the fields empty. But the silence that followed was heavier than anything the farmer had felt before. He backed up slowly, guiding the horse into the barn, trying to convince himself that staying put was the safest choice for now. He secured the barn door, though deep down he knew no simple lock could keep out whatever was moving through the fields. The next morning, the news spread fast. A large tree near the woods had been shattered down the middle, though no storm passed through the night. People gathered around it, staring at the split trunk, whispering theories with wide eyes. Some said lightning had done it, but others argued lightning never struck that silently. The farmer stayed at the edge of the crowd, saying nothing while his mind raced. He knew the crack he heard last night wasn't lightning. He had been outside when it happened, and no flash of light hit the sky. When he returned home, he kept glancing toward the barn. The horse seemed restless again, walking tight circles in its stall. The farmer stepped inside, and the horse stopped, staring at him with an urgency he felt down to his core. He didn't know how to understand the message behind the horse's gaze, but he felt it clearly. Something was coming, and the horse knew it better than anyone else. As evening fell, the farmer prepared the farm as best he could. He checked the gates, tightened the fences, and made sure the doors were secure. He wasn't certain what he was protecting himself from, but every instinct he had told him the farm wouldn't remain untouched for long. When the sun dipped low, the sky took on a strange, muted color, almost like the light itself was fading faster than it should. By the time night settled, the tension reached its highest point. The farmer sat at his kitchen table, unable to eat, unable to sit still. Every noise outside made him jump, and every shift of the wind reminded him of the unknown force moving closer. He rose finally and walked back to the barn once more, drawn again by something deeper than curiosity. The horse stood motionless in the center of the stall, facing the open doorway. The farmer felt a sudden jolt of fear, realizing the horse was waiting for something specific. He stepped in slowly, holding his breath as if any sound might disturb the balance of the moment. Then it happened. The same low humming returned, but this time it vibrated through the entire barn, rattling the boards and trembling the ground beneath them. The lantern hanging near the door swayed back and forth, light dancing across the walls in frantic strokes. The horse lifted its head high, every muscle in its body tense, its eyes reflecting the flickering lantern light with a sharp, eerie intensity. The farmer stumbled back, gripping the stall door for support. The humming grew louder, building into a deep, rumbling force that seemed to move toward the farm from the direction of the woods. The air thickened, pressing down on him until he felt like his lungs could barely pull in breath. He turned his head toward the open doorway, and his heart dropped as he saw the same faint glow appear again in the distance. But this time it didn't flicker. It burned bright, steady, and it was coming closer. The horse stepped forward, its body filled with a strength the farmer had never seen in it before. The animal looked powerful now, as if the weakness everyone mocked had been nothing but a thin layer covering the truth. The farmer stood frozen, watching the glow advance across the fields, unable to move, unable to speak. The air buzzed with tension, building higher and higher until it felt like the entire world was about to split apart. And just as the glow reached the edge of the farm, everything went silent. The silence that fell over the farm was so sudden and so complete that the farmer felt his ears ring. The glow at the edge of the field stopped moving, almost as if it had reached an invisible line it could not cross. He stood frozen in the barn doorway, unable to look away, aware of the horse stepping up beside him with steady, confident movements. The weak creature the town had dismissed no longer looked fragile. Instead, it stood with a calm strength that seemed to rise out of the ground itself. The glow flickered, dimmed, then brightened again, as though it was struggling to hold its shape. The farmer blinked hard, trying to make sense of it. The light didn't come from a flame or a lantern, and it wasn't the cold shine of metal or glass. It felt alive in a strange way, like it carried a purpose and its own kind of heartbeat. The horse didn't move away. It took one firm step forward and lowered its head, as if offering itself as a challenge or a warning. The farmer felt a surge of fear, but when he looked at the horse, that fear settled deeper into curiosity. The humming that had rattled the barn only moments before faded into a faint tremble, then disappeared entirely. The wind picked up softly, rustling the grass and easing the tension in the air. Something shifted then. Not in the fields, not in the sky, but inside the farmer himself. He could feel that the glow wasn't there to harm them. It was drawn to the horse, but not out of danger. More out of recognition. The glow slowly pulled back, moving away from the barn, drifting toward the woods like a lantern carried by hands the farmer couldn't see. The horse watched it until it vanished among the trees. When the last trace of light was gone, the horse exhaled heavily, its whole body relaxing. The farmer finally let his shoulders drop, feeling the weight of days wash off him in a single shake. He closed the barn door gently, then leaned against it for a moment to steady himself. His heart was still racing, but something inside him felt lifted. The horse nudged his shoulder softly. He reached up and rested his hand on the warm face, grateful for the steadiness it offered. The next morning brought a brightness different from the days before. The sun rose clear over the fields, washing away the uneasy shadows that had lingered for so long. Birds filled the air with sound, and even the soil felt lighter beneath the farmer's boots. He walked to the barn expecting the horse to be restless again, but instead it stood grazing peacefully as if nothing unusual had happened the night before. The farmer worked through his chores quietly, replaying the night in his mind again and again. As he moved across the fields, he noticed that the air felt normal again, no humming, no glow, no strange stillness. For the first time in weeks, the farm felt like a farm should feel. Yet nothing inside him felt the same. There were questions he still couldn't answer, but they no longer frightened him. They felt like mysteries meant to be respected, not feared. News traveled slowly into town that morning. Folks heard about the shattered tree and the odd glow some families had claimed to see. But with daylight washing over the town, most people were quick to dismiss their own fears. They blamed lantern tricks or an old tale someone had stirred up by accident. No one spoke of anything bigger. No one dared to. The farmer listened to their chatter without arguing or supporting. He simply nodded and kept to himself. Later in the day, the town blacksmith approached him with a curious look. He asked how the horse was doing, expecting the same weakness and complaints everyone had spoken of. But the farmer smiled in a soft way that made the blacksmith pause. He said the horse was doing well and that was all he shared. The blacksmith didn't push for more. Something in the farmer's tone made it clear that the animal was no longer a subject for ridicule. In the days that followed, the horse's reputation began to shift. People who had once laughed at the animal now looked at it with a mix of interest and respect. They noticed the way the horse moved with quiet confidence and how it stood by the farmer's side without hesitation. The children in town asked if they could pet it, though their parents kept a cautious distance. Rumors rose again, but this time they weren't mocking. They were curious. Some said the horse had saved the farmer from something. Others claimed it had chased away whatever had been haunting the fields. The farmer didn't correct or encourage any of it. He simply went on with his days, grateful for the peace returning to the land. But he knew deep inside that the horse held a hidden truth the town would never fully understand. And maybe it was better that way. Not every mystery needed to be explained. Some simply needed to be witnessed. One afternoon, as the farmer worked in the pasture, he noticed how strong the horse had become. Its muscles had filled out, its coat shone brighter. It moved with a quiet pride that no one could miss. The horse didn't look anything like the useless creature the townsfolk once dismissed. The change wasn't sudden. It had grown over time, shaped by whatever force had connected the horse to the glow that night. The farmer leaned against the fence, watching it run across the field with a freedom that made his chest ache. He wondered again where the horse had truly come from, why it had been left for him to find. Why it had chosen him of all people to trust. The questions would never leave him completely, but they no longer felt like burdens. They felt like a gift. The seasons began to shift, bringing cooler air and longer shadows. The farmer rebuilt one of the gates, repaired the barn roof, and tended to the soil with renewed spirit. The horse stayed close but no longer paced in fear or nervousness. Sometimes, when the nights were especially quiet, the farmer thought he saw a faint glow near the woods again. Never as bright or as close. Always distant, like a reminder that some connection still lingered beyond the edge of the world he knew. But it never came onto the farm again. And the horse no longer reacted with fear. Instead, it stood calm whenever the glow appeared, as though acknowledging something only it understood. The town eventually forgot the stories of strange lights and broken trees. People moved on, busy with crops and trade and the daily rhythm of their lives. But they never forgot the horse. It became a quiet symbol of strength, resilience, and the idea that worth isn't always seen at first glance. No one mocked the farmer anymore. In fact, they often sought his advice, believing he had a way of seeing things others missed. He didn't claim any special talent. He simply trusted what he had learned, that sometimes the world hides its greatest truths in the most unlikely places, that sometimes a creature seen as weak can hold the power to protect an entire farm, and that sometimes the connection between a man and an animal can reveal more about the world than any explanation ever could. As time passed, the farmer grew older, his steps slowed, his chores took longer, but the horse stayed by his side through it all. When he walked the fields, the horse followed. When he rested under the old oak tree, the horse stood guard. They shared a bond that didn't need words. Years later, when folks spoke about the farm, they spoke of the strange season when fear swept through the town. They spoke of the glow that wandered the woods. But mostly they spoke of the horse that transformed everything. The horse that proved strength could rise from weakness. The horse that reminded them to look deeper before making judgments. The farmer often sat by the barn in the evenings, watching the sky shift from gold to blue. The horse grazed nearby, peaceful and steady, and every so often he could swear he felt the faintest hum beneath the earth, soft and familiar. He never feared it. Instead, he welcomed it like an old friend. In the end, the mystery never needed solving. The truth wasn't in the glow or the humming or the broken tree. The truth was in the way the horse had changed him, the way it had changed the town, and the way it had shown that even something called useless could hold a purpose powerful enough to touch every life around it. And with that truth, the farm finally found the peace it had been waiting for.